at the end of the day, I will still do whatever it takes to make me free.
Hello everyone, today we are talking about Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup, Season 1, Episode 1, and it just premiered June 3rd, 2024 over on Lifetime. I just want to preface this by saying I did not follow this case closely. I remember when it happened. I remember when she was going to court. I remember all of that because I'm a pretty big true crime fan, so it was out there. People were discussing it a lot. It was very present on social media, but it wasn't something I kept up with. I've been far more interested in Gypsy Rose now that she is released, and she is sharing so much on social media. With that in mind, let's start talking about this first very awkward episode of Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup. I could give you guys a really short recap, and basically that would be in episode 1, Gypsy Rose gets released from prison and heads to Kansas City to see her family. She has some issues with her parole officer, but she still gets to stay in Kansas City and plans on going to a Chiefs game. That right there is pretty much the whole episode. What makes it worth watching, if you're interested in watching this, is her interaction with her husband. I mean, that is going to be the story, I feel like, at this point. It's weird. It's sort of awkward to watch. But let's talk about it a little bit more in order and some of the stuff that happens. So the show starts out with Gypsy Rose still in prison in Chillicothe. Her family is in Kansas City at an Airbnb. The plan is Ryan is there at that Airbnb with her dad, her stepmom, and her half-sister, and Ryan's going to go to the prison, pick her up when she's released, and bring her back to Kansas City. She's going to stay there a few days and go to a Chiefs game. So that is the plan. They're all going to see her at this Airbnb. As we're waiting for the release, we get to see the family waiting for it to happen and them all interacting with each other. Christy says that she's feeling very overwhelmed, but she's excited. She's there decorating. She's putting up a Christmas tree. There's a part where her dad talks about how now that she's being released, she's going to have to learn to make her own choices and make her own mistakes and live with the consequences. And he uses the marriage to Ryan as an example of this. He says that this is something she's just going to have to live with the consequences of. She's made her own choice. And I completely understand why they don't think she should have jumped into the marriage. I 100% agree. But the one thing I disagree on when he's talking is he says she needs to learn to live with the consequences. I think Gypsy probably fully understands that there are consequences for actions. I mean, she's been facing the consequences for years. But I do think she's also incredibly stunted and doesn't have that sort of life experience and wisdom to make good decisions. But I do think that Gypsy also understands that she will have to live with the consequences of her choices, probably more than a lot of other people do. After her dad makes this comment about the marriage with Ryan, it goes over to Gypsy, and she says that the reason her relationship with Ryan is different is because he stuck around as he got to know her more, and after she revealed all of her emotional baggage to him, he didn't leave. And she said other people left after they realized that she wasn't a character, but she was an actual human with flaws. I found that to be a little bit funny because if you're starting a relationship with someone and they're in a correctional facility for conspiring to have their mother's life ended, how can you not know they have flaws? The only thing I can think is that people that might have been getting in relationships with her were doing it as sort of a novelty, something they could go tell people like, oh, I'm talking to Gypsy Rose, like, you know, something to brag about over dinner, something to talk about on social media, and less an actual relationship, because you cannot tell me you were talking to her thinking she was like some perfect human being. She was going to come with baggage. Absolutely. 100%. Shortly after this, we see Ryan heading to Chillicothe. So he's leaving Kansas City to go pick Gypsy Rose up. And on the way there, she calls him. So he takes this call And there's this cute moment between them.
Oh, did you text me how much McDonald's and French fries?
No, I haven't, baby, but I will.
Okay, I love you.
I love you too. Bye, baby.
So Gypsy wants some McDonald's French fries, and Ryan seems more than happy to get those for her because he is grinning when she is talking to him, and he keeps grinning when this phone call ends. He seems very, very happy to talk to her and to be going and getting her. The only thing I wish when I was watching this part was that he had a different setup for his phone, because he really holds his phone a lot when he is driving. At least during the episode, he really needs to get a different setup. Like, he needs to use a speakerphone, maybe take the phone out of the wallet thing he has. I don't know. He needs to just rethink his driving and talking situation. We jump forward a bit, and Ryan is finally able to go to the prison and get Gypsy. When he arrives there, he's told he needs to turn the cameras off, but he does continue to record some of the audio. And we hear a lot of Ryan telling Gypsy that she looks good. Now, you may be thinking, oh, that's sweet, right? Wrong. There's just something about it that's so awkward to hear. I wish there was just some stuff they left out, but they don't. So we get to hear Ryan telling Gypsy that she looks good quite a bit during this episode. And as long as the copyright claims do not begin, I'm going to throw a little clip in here just to show you the awkwardness that I'm talking about. Here it is.
It's so hot.
Oh, it feels so weird.
So clearly that clip was really short. Again, I'm just trying to stay away from copyright issues, but take that scene and multiply that by 10. That's what it felt like. I felt like I was watching that over and over in the car ride. He is very excited to get his hands on her. He is touching her leg, telling her she is hot, and we are watching it. And there's nothing specifically wrong about that, but I was just like, why did they have to film that? Maybe they should have let them have the car ride home to themselves, you know? And it just continues on, because then they actually head to a hotel room. When they finally get to the hotel, Gypsy gets those McDonald's fries she was wanting. She tries vaping, and Ryan tries to get them to lay down and tries to get a little bit of physical contact going. He clearly has a goal in mind. He knows what he's wanting, but you can tell he's trying to restrain himself a little bit. He's trying to hold back. At least that was my perception. It's very, very awkward to watch. It's a little bit uncomfortable. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this on a reality show before. You guys can let me know how you felt about it down in the comments. It was just really awkward. Eventually they do lay down, and fortunately we go away, right? And all the awkwardness ends. The next morning, Gypsy and Ryan wake up and leave the hotel. They're going to be heading to Kansas City to meet her family, but first they need to stop at a shoe store because her shoes do not fit right. When they get out of the car at the shoe store, they look at the sidewalk and they see a few photographers standing there, and they realize then that they were being followed. And after they leave the shoe store, they continue to be followed. So it is clear that the media is not going to give Gypsy a lot of privacy, and there's going to be a lot of attention on her, specifically these first few days after her release. Ryan and Gypsy leave the shoe store, and they're going to continue to head on to Kansas City, where her family is waiting for her with her attorney and his wife. So they've showed up to the Airbnb. They're all just sitting around waiting and talking. There is this part where her attorney says something about how now if you want to communicate with Gypsy, you're not just going to be communicating with her, but you're also going to have to go through Ryan. So there continues to be these little jabs at Ryan, and it's nothing specifically bad, but you can just tell that they don't think this marriage was a good idea. During this car ride, Gypsy gets a call from her parole officer in Missouri. And basically, he's like, when are you going to report to Louisiana? And this is when we are all reminded that Gypsy's not really fully released from prison. She is out on parole. She can go back to prison if she does not do what they say. And there ends up being some conflict where it seems like the correctional facility in Missouri and the correctional facility in Louisiana haven't communicated very well. The people in Missouri want to know when they no longer are the ones monitoring her. They want to know when she's left the state. The people in Louisiana are like, hey, you have a few days. You don't have to rush down here. And so there ends up being a lot of conflict. I'm not going to go into detail about every phone call, but I will tell you that it starts in the car. And it seems like she's got it worked out. She's going to stay in Kansas City for a few days. She's going to go to this Chiefs game. And then she's going to Louisiana. But it doesn't end there. It just continues. There are phone calls going back and forth. It seems like Louisiana is perfectly fine with her waiting a few days to get there because it is a holiday. So they have no one to do her intake. But over in Missouri, they are having a little bit of a harder time with this. It seems like they want her to go on to Louisiana. What we realize when we're watching this is that there's a lot of media hype around her being in Kansas City and going to this Chiefs game. Everyone is saying that she wants to meet Taylor Swift. So it's turning into this huge, huge thing. And it feels like they are wanting her to just leave the state. Eventually, they make it to that Airbnb and she gets in there and she's hugging her family and they're all excited to see her. And then they start talking about this situation with the parole officers and where she's supposed to report. Fortunately, her attorney is there to help her, but she gets very, very emotional, which is completely understandable. Can you imagine being released from prison, being super excited, but not even making it to your first destination before your parole officers begin calling you back and forth and they're not agreeing? And that sort of conflict when you're already super emotional and trying to process everything. I can completely understand why she got as upset as she did. She starts crying, she excuses herself and goes to the bathroom. But while this is all happening, there's kind of something else happening as well, if you really pay attention, and that is Ryan. Ryan is happening. As this has all been going on, it becomes clear that he thinks he's going to control these situations. The first time I noticed something a little bit weird with Ryan was when they were in the car and the parole officer called. Gypsy is talking and Ryan starts talking over her. Now, this is the part where the parole officer is saying, you know, you need to report to Louisiana. You have to go straight there. You can't stop in Kansas City because they have heard about this Chiefs game. They've heard that Gypsy's going to be going to it. You can tell that Ryan has this attitude of like, we're going to tell them what we're going to do. And that is just not how it works. She is on parole. She could end up right back in that correctional facility. She needs to listen to them. And you can tell that Gypsy understands that. But it feels like Ryan doesn't. And when he's talking over her, it just bothered me a little bit. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. However, it continues on. When they are in the Airbnb and they are all talking about this situation, there is a moment where Ryan says, we need to get a hold of the parole officer, or he says, I need to. It's either I or we. I cannot recall exactly which one it was, but either way, it felt really odd to me. The only person that needs to get a hold of the parole officer is Gypsy and maybe her attorney. But no one else, not Ryan. Ryan doesn't need to be talking to the parole officer about anything because I think he's going to get a little bit of a bad attitude if he doesn't hear what he wants to hear. Like if that parole officer was like, you really are going to Louisiana, don't stop. I think Ryan would have gotten a bit nasty where I think Gypsy realizes she needs to comply with what they say to do. She needs to listen to them or she could go back to prison. I think Ryan feels like they can sort of demand things. So I think Gypsy's attorney was onto something where when he was saying now we all have to communicate with Ryan as well. I think Ryan feels that way. Like if you want to talk to Gypsy, if you want to do something with Gypsy, I'm her husband. You're going to have to talk to me too. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone wants to talk to Ryan. In the end, it does get worked out so that she can stay there in Kansas City and go to this game and then return to Louisiana after the new year. So it's all worked out in the end. I think Gypsy Rose is incredibly lucky to have the relationship she does now with her stepmom and her dad. I think her stepmom seems to be really excited that she's going to be able to spend time with her and have her involved more in the family. And I think her dad loves her and is going to give her good advice. There is a part of this episode where he brings up the fact that everyone is saying she wants to meet Taylor Swift and how he worries that she's in the mindset that she can use this situation to get ahead and meet celebrities because her mom used to use illnesses as a way to get ahead and meet celebrities. and he doesn't want her to think like that. And I just thought that was really insightful. I was giving no thought to the fact that her mom used to do that. I didn't think anything of the fact that she wanted to meet Taylor Swift and how it may have related to her being raised by Dee Dee. So I just think her dad's going to be insightful and be able to give her some good advice if she will take it and if Ryan can stay out of the way. So I think she's really lucky. I think the part of this that is going to be entertaining is both watching Gypsy experience things that she's never experienced and watching this marriage unfold. Because there's just something there that's weird. But you guys can let me know down in the comments what you think. If you haven't already and feel like it, I hope you'll click like and subscribe and come back to Happily Ever Reality. We'll be talking about episode 2 of Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup.